money is just the most liquid good by definition. And so, it's what has the superior properties that lead it to be a liquid good. And, Bitcoin has superior properties and we're all adopting it. Now, if we weren't all adopting Bitcoin, I mean, money is a shared illusion.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone agrees that a dollar is money because everyone knows you can go into a store and pay for shit with it, and the government prints it fine. Everyone agrees that gold is money. It's been around 5,000 years. It's hard to get it out of the ground. They know what it is. It's shiny. You can see it, et cetera. And what's happening is everybody's going to one day agree that Bitcoin is money. I mean, a lot of us already know that, but some people don't. Some people don't believe that it's money, but the number of those people are shrinking and the number of people who believe are growing. As long as that trend continues, Bitcoin's going to be money. I mean, it already is, but it's going to be, and if you look at its properties, if you look at its characteristics, I mean, that's what led Saylor to go, this is a better weapon. I mean, it's or safe to say, we just invented gunpowder and gold guys have got spears and axes. I mean, fucking gunpowder's going to win.
Yeah. Larry Lepard with us here in El Salvador. I was hoping you were going to bring Peter Schiff along with you so he could see how Bitcoin actually can be used in daily transactions.
Cage fight, huh?
Yes. We got to get Schiff down here at some point.
Yeah.
Get him off his island.
Yeah. So, nice to be here. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
It's the first time in El Salvador, right?
First time in El Salvador, yeah.
Okay.
Love it so far. It's great.
It's I think it's one of those things that all Bitcoiners need to come and experience firsthand.
Yeah.
And so obviously the having party was a great excuse for a lot of people.
Exactly. It worked well.
To come down. So I've actually followed your stuff, and I know that you come from the metal side of things, but I don't think I've ever heard your Bitcoin story.
How I transitioned?
So,
yeah, sure. I'll take you through that. So, well, first of all, the first part of my career, I wasn't involved in any sound money stuff. I was a technology investor,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I did
tech
not know
stocks
that.
from the early 80s all the way to 2003 or 4. I mean, just really
like
technology.
Professionally? That's what
professionally, managing funds, venture capital funds mostly. And got involved in the internet. We did PCs and graphic cards and disk drive and all that stuff. But that was the first chapter of my career, and it lasted until about 2004.
Okay.
And when the bubble burst, the internet bubble burst, I kind of said I'd made enough money. I said, okay, this is good. I'm going to kind of retire or manage my own money and pivot into just investing in a different way. And so I started spending a lot of time with my kids and their sports teams and stuff because they were young and growing up, and it was fun. And then 2008 happened, and I was a gold guy then too. I mean, I was a Ron Paul supporter. I believed in libertarianism and Austrian economics and sound money and all that. I mean, I got all of that at the time, but I wasn't radicalized for it. It was like, okay, it was just a part of my investing strategy. And then 2008 happened. I got radicalized, right? I mean, they bailed out those banks, and I was pissed off. I mean, I was like, okay, this is a whole another animal we're dealing with here. They're going to debase this money. And I mean, little did I know, right? Because Q1, I mean, they started off just with TARP, and and then they just went to QE1 and QE2 and QE. I mean, and 0% interest. I mean, we all know what happened.
Well, in
right?
retrospect, based on what they did during COVID, it seems like nothing.
Oh, it's trivial. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
but at the time, it was like,
oh, it's huge.
Gosh.
I mean, the Fed balance sheet was $800 billion. It went to like 1.5 trillion. I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, these savings I've got, they're going to get debased. I'm young enough. I'm not going to have a good retirement if they get debased. So, excuse me. So I started getting radicalized for sound money. So actually, what drove Satoshi to write the white paper was also what drove me to pivot my business. And so I said, okay, inflation's coming. Let's study inflation. Well, the last period of inflation we had was the 70s, right? Very highly inflationary period. What did well in the 70s? Top performing asset in the 70s, gold. Okay, and gold stocks. The gold stocks were up 35% compound for 10 years. Gold went from $35 in 71 to $800 at the end of the decade. So I thought, all right, if we're going to have inflation, I need to know about gold. So I went and educated myself in the gold business and started putting my money into gold mining stocks and pivoted and was a gold stock investor, really. I was taught by a really good guy in Boston.
Were you running any funds at that time?
Yeah,
or was it
I
just...
did. I did a little family and friends fund,
Okay.
mostly my money, but some family and friends, and then started taking outside investors, and it grew as people heard about it. And I had a partner or a friend who was also in the same area, a guy named Walter Cabot, who was very famous, well-known gold stock investor. He kind of taught me the business. This is back in '08. And for a couple of years, it worked really well. We had a couple of 40% annualized returns. And then, of course, gold hit a buzzsaw in 2011, 2012, and we had a really rough time for a bunch of years, which led me to getting very fit so that I can live to make sure we beat the central bankers.
Yeah, I was impressed. You were out there yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I was fat and overweight before this whole thing happened.
So I have hope still.
Yeah, well, no, you don't. You'll be fine. Sound money saved me in the sense that it got me to get physically active. But anyway, so where did my Bitcoin story begin? So I'm managing this gold and silver fund, hoping they're going to protect us against sound money, or against debasement, and of course we had a bear market, and that made it kind of rough. But and all along the way, I've been aware of Bitcoin because I was Ron Paul and all those guys, the New Hampshire Free State Project and all. I mean, I know people who up there. There was a woman who did some work with me. I did some advertisements for Ron Paul when he ran for president, and graphic designer up there, and she bought a bunch of Bitcoin at $100 a coin. I mean, it's good going, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't do it. I'll tell you why. At the time, and I don't know if you recall, but there had been a lot of attempts to do internet-based money. There was eCash and eGold and several Hashcash.
And coming from the tech side of things, you were probably aware of all those.
I was totally aware of them, and I thought to myself, this is kind of cool. Yeah, I'd love to have digital money outside of the state like gold. But as you recall, they didn't work. I mean, they all failed. They all had a fatal flaw. They had a double spend problem. They were centralized. I mean, you name it, there was something wrong with them. Adam Back was involved with one of them that he contributed a piece to what ultimately became the white paper. But so my initial reaction, I was talking with Max about this yesterday. My initial reaction to Bitcoin was, oh, this is fucked. It'll never work. Technically, it'll never work. Not that I don't believe in it, just it won't work. But, and so that's 08, 9, 10, 11. I thought, well, how do I get some of these? Well, you got to go to a cafe. You got to give some guy some cash. He's going to give you a paper wallet. I mean, I'm like, what? That just seems kind of weird. So, or you can run a computer and you can mine them yourself. And, actually my daughter, who was in high school at the time, her boyfriend was mining them. But I think he got a lot of them. But I also think when they hit $1 or $2 a share, he sold them to buy a car.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, didn't really understand what he had. But anyway, so I kind of just, didn't pay attention. But it kept bouncing along, and when it broke out from I remember it was in the 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and then it broke out. It was a couple hundred. I was like, okay, well, it's still working, right? It's now we're 4 or 5 years in, and then it went over 100, and then it went to 1,000. I was like, holy shit, this is maybe there's something here. I got to pay attention to this. So I went and I started filling out the forms for Mt. Gox, and I just sheer grace of God, right? I was about to send the money to Mt. Gox, and they failed. So I would have lost all that money. But very soon thereafter, Coinbase came public, as you recall, and Coinbase was in San Francisco, venture-backed, real American. I thought, okay, this is
you don't have to send some
this is,
money order to Japan.
Exactly, this is totally legit. Yeah. Okay, fine. So I went and I bought a handful of coins at Coinbase, not a ton, but like $300-400 a coin, something like that. And I started studying it, right? And my concern as a tech guy, tech investor background was always, is this shit going to work? Is it going to blow up? I mean, that was because having had a lot of tech experience and being around from the IBM PC days when it was, launched in 1980, probably before most people's listening's time, but there's something called the blue screen of death. You'd be running your IBM PC, and something would go wrong, and the screen would just go blue. And guess what? Whatever file you were working on, you lost that work.
Yeah.
And, so back then they had autosave functions, and you had to remember to save your files because.
I remember doing homework in that era, and like you're just about finished, and then it's.
Yeah, right. It crashes, and you reboot it. Just turn on, off, and it comes back up. But whatever you were doing, right. So that kind of thought pattern led me to just be suspicious of the technology. So then what I did was I started going to meetups, and I was in Boston, so I went to an MIT meetup. And there were a couple.
What year was that?
We're probably talking 2014,
Okay.
2013, 14, 15. After I bought some, but not a lot. And I sat next to a core developer. I started talking to the guy. He said, "Yeah, I'm one of the core developers. I work on Dual." I knew a core developer. I knew that was big. And I said to him, "What's the story on this thing? Are you worried about it? Is it going to work? Is the technology sound? And I didn't remember at this time. I didn't understand the hashing. I didn't understand blockchain. I didn't understand SHA-256 difficult. I mean, none of that. I didn't get any of that. I just knew it was magic internet money, right? And he said to me, he said, "Well, to be honest with you, it's an experiment, and we don't know, and I can't guarantee anything." And I said, "Well, what worries you?" He said, "Well, sometimes we'll make some changes in the code, and I go home that night and put my head on the pillow, and I think to myself, fuck, I might have just blown the whole thing up." And so, to a professional investor who's looking at putting big money in this thing, I was kind of like, I don't know, right? I mean, if it's a guy who's running it and he's thinking it could blow up, so I was cautious, right? But then the phone.
Well, and at that point, it could blow up.
Yeah, it could. Well, we had and we had
screwed it up.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually check the history, there were a few back doors that were closed. We had we had the hard forks. We had the block war. I mean, there were things that were risky that everyone who was involved with it says, yeah, at any point in time. Vera tried to take it in the wrong direction, and the nodes outvoted him. I mean, there was shit that could have gone bad, right?
Yeah.
And we all know. But I kept buying it slowly, just kind of accumulating it, and as it went higher, and then I really got FOMO'd into when in Thanksgiving of 2017. I remember it took that big ramp up to 17. I was like, holy shit, this is a totally different beast, man. I mean, and that was when I kind of got it. And of course I bought a bunch at 17, which right.
Everybody has to buy at the top.
You absolutely got to. You got to FOMO in. And then I went down to 10. I doubled down. Then I went down to 4.5. I doubled down again, and then I just kind of got into kind of a DCA rhythm where as I'd make more money, I'd buy more coins. And I mean, it's been up and down. And 2020 happened, went way down. I mean, we all know it's a rocky ride, right? But I, and of course, Safe's book came out. I read that. We had Safe to Boston. I, hosted a luncheon forum with institutional investors. None of them got it, but the guy,
Really?
yeah, none of them. But the guy, I mean, the Fidelity guys got it. But that was it.
I feel like after reading that book, it's hard for me.
How can you not get it? I know that book is such a fabulous book. It's going to be historical.
Yeah.
I give it out when I try an orange pill. Anybody who's smart, I give them that book.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious, right? I mean,
and I love how it doesn't even talk about Bitcoin until
the first
end.
half. The first half is Austrian economics, which nobody knows, and I love the fact that I run around. I mean, and I knew all that shit. I read Von Mises, I read Rothbard, I read all those guys in the '80s.
But it was nice the way he synthesized it all together.
Absolutely.
Because you knew all those things, but it was hard to even explain it to somebody else. But the way he put it together.
And what's so cool to me is now I got 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds coming up to me quoting these guys. I'm like, holy shit, how did this happen? You know what I mean? I mean, I was kind of I was always the old, gold guy crank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Austrian crank that nobody paid attention to, and everyone thought I was nuts, including my wife. And seriously, so I got more and more conviction as I learned more and more about it, like we all do. And I just kept getting heavier and heavier into it. But I was still managing this gold stock fund, and I still am today. And I have a lot of clients there. I feel very responsible for them, and we're going to do fine. I mean, gold's going to go up with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's going to go up more. But my responsibility to the gold fund is to get them all out at a very nice profit, which I think on this next run we will do, and then we'll see. I mean, I haven't decided the answer.
You guys don't hold any Bitcoin in that fund?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, and that's an interesting story, right? So somewhere along the line, I thought to myself, this is a sound money fund, and I've told them gold, and I've told them gold mining stocks, and we've done all that, but this Bitcoin thing is a real, there's enormous. And so I said, but I thought I got to tell everybody, right? So I took, a 2% Bitcoin position, 98%. Well, and some people left. Some people got pissed and they left, and and I think the cost was, it was like 4,000 a coin or something, right? And, and they're glad we did it now.
Yeah.
And now we've got about a 10 to 12% Bitcoin, actually Bitcoin weighting, and then we've done some private deals too.
Is that have you done any rebalancing during that time, or is that just from the initial?
That's just from the initial. Well, we've added.
Okay.
We've actually added. But some of it's from the initial.
Okay.
I think there was a time we needed some liquidity. We might have sold some and bought some back. But long story short, we're up to about 12% now. I think 10, 12% at today's prices in Bitcoin. And we did some Bitcoin venture related things. We were in a miner. We were early stage mining, Bitcoin mining operation. We've done Ego Death, and we've done 1031. We're in Custodia Bank, which just got a very unfavorable judgment. Caitlin, we really believe in what she's trying to do, but sadly, and I think she'll recover. And there are other ways for that business to go, but that was kind of a kick in the teeth. But the point is, we have some Bitcoin exposure to the gold fund, but most of the people who invested with me,
it balances out the miner performance
a little bit. Yeah, it helps. It definitely helps.
So why do you think the gold miners have been?
Oh, the miners have been horrible. Well, that's an entirely different story. Look, when they work, they really work.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, in 1997, or I'm sorry, 2019, my fund went up 97%. Okay,
Wow.
2020, my fund went up 122%. Okay, so that's basically 400% in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when the miners are working. Okay, that was COVID. We're going to print money. They're explosive to the upside. Okay, to be totally fair, they're down 40 to 50% from there now. We gave half of that back as they corrected. Okay, and sadly, as it always works within these businesses, in 2020, after I'd been up 400%, everyone and their brother wanted to invest.
Yeah.
Right? Give me some of that. Give me some of that. Give me some of that. And of course, now they're bitching. What the hell happened? How am I down 40%? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, why the miners have been such poor performers? The miners are a leveraged bet on gold. I mean, if you actually look at gold, it's up quite a bit, since 2016.
Yeah.
In 2016, it was
That's what it seemed. I mean, I don't follow that.
Yeah.
With that closely, but you see gold
look,
going
yeah.
up and the miners kind of like stagnating.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, just to reprise the history, in 2016, so in 2011, after I'd had a couple of really good years, gold was $1,900. Big bear market, a lot of ways I can explain that, but it's not worth going into. At 2016, gold bottomed or 2015, end of 2015, gold bottomed at $1,050. Today, gold is at $2,300. Okay, so gold has been in a bull market since 2016 with ups and downs, zigzag along that way. And if you held gold in that time frame, you made money. Gold miners are leveraged bets on gold, very leveraged bets on gold, which is why you can have a couple 100% up years and then a 30% down or 40% down, right? And the reason the miners, and they're starting to take off again now, and I think we're about to have some more of those up years, but the reason the miners are so leveraged is that they have a big operating cost. It costs money to take gold out of the ground. Typically, back in 2016, it probably cost $800 on average to mine gold, and gold was $1,000. It's a pretty skinny margin. It went up to $1,300 or $1,400, and that $800 cost of taking it out didn't go up that much. And so the margin started to grow, and the stock started to go up. Today, the average cost to take an ounce out of the ground is $1,300, and the price is $2,300. But that's only very recently.
Yeah.
As recently as a couple months ago, the price was $2,000 or $1,900, something like that. So, and that $1,300, that is affected by inflation in a big way. Okay, in other words, you've got explosives, you've got oil, you've got truck tires, you've got wages, all of that. So every year, the cost of mining an ounce goes up, inflation adjusted, 8 to 12%. Well, okay, so if the price of the metal doesn't go up that much, guess what? Your margin just disappeared. And so what was going on since 2020, we had a big burst of inflation, stocks went way up, price of gold went way up, but then the price of gold leveled off at, $1,900, $1,800, $2,000. But, what used to be $1,100 to mine it is now $13, going to $14, going to $15. So everyone who's a gold stock investor is saying, holy shit, with gold at 19 and 13 in cost, going to 16, going to, pretty soon these guys aren't going to make any money. These stocks are no good. So that's why the gold stocks have performed so poorly. Now, and I can say with certainty that, the consensus estimates on Wall Street and in Toronto, where most gold stocks are priced, was that the price of gold was going to stay in the $1,800 to $1,900 area. And if it did, they would be shitty businesses because the costs would keep going up.
Yeah.
But what's happened is gold has just broken out. There was a 2,100 ceiling. It's now at 23. I believe it'll go to 25 or 3,000. And of course, at that level,
I know it is because Shift, finally has something to tweet about.
Right,
so.
Exactly. Yeah, he's happy with it. And yeah, poor Peter. Yeah, poor Peter. He's missing it all. He's got so much of it right, and he just can't get this piece right. I tried to educate him. I debated him. I tried to help him out. But anyway, yeah. So I think we're in one of those periods where we're about to have another run. But I would say to everybody who's involved in gold mining stocks, remember, these are stocks to rent, not own. It's a very difficult business. And yes, they work really well when you have a tailwind at your back, but they also don't work so well when the metal price is flat or going down. In that respect, they have a similar characteristic to Bitcoin miners, right? Bitcoin miners are.
Yeah, I was wondering what.
There's a real parallel, right? There's a real parallel. Yeah. You got to keep your energy costs low, and you're fighting that halving. Every 4 years, your reward's getting chopped. And so,
And I guess in gold mining, it gets more and more difficult. The percentage
it does.
content you're bringing up.
It does. Look, we've been mining gold for hundreds of years, and I can assure you the easy deposits have all been found.
Yeah.
I always laugh. There was something on the web or on Twitter or something, Ghana, somebody in Ghana said, oh, we found 30 billion ounces of gold. No, you didn't. It's actually physically impossible. I mean, the whole world has been so scoured for gold, and there used to be that we would find 5 and 10 million deposits, 10 million ounce deposits, one every few years. Now we're not finding any of those. I mean, we're finding like 1 and 2. I mean, so it does get harder. There's a slight difficulty adjustment in gold too, right? It gets harder to find good deposits. So, but it's a tough business. It's a really tough business, and I would say, throughout this whole process, I have become more and more and more orange-pilled. It's very, very clear to me that, Bitcoin is digital gold. It's a superior form of gold in all respects except the volatility. And if you can handle the volatility, which I propose you handle it by sizing your position correctly, then it's just a much better alpha choice. I mean, it's crushing gold.
Yeah.
So
it seems like in the metals camp, there's like this divide between, the people that are metals but get Bitcoin and now are kind of like you moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And then the ones that absolutely hate it, I think partially because they feel like it's stealing some of gold's momentum.
There's no doubt that it is, and it's sad. And I everyone has their own reasons. I mean, it's what is it, Sinclair's? It's hard to get a man to understand something that affects his pocketbook. You know what I mean? And so, that's correct. I mean, you've seen a lot of the people pivot and understand it. I mean,
like Kitco, seems like they've pivoted, and
or take a guy like Ronnie Stofferle, who's a good guy and a brilliant guy and a friend, and does a definitive gold report, but has a partner who's doing Bitcoin, and totally understands Bitcoin, and they support Bitcoin. I mean, there's a role for both of them. There really is. I mean, it's not. I mean, the one thing I would say, some Bitcoiners say, well, gold's going to zero tomorrow. No, that's not going to happen. Yeah, gold is going to work. Bitcoin's going to work a lot better, and that's really my way of viewing it. And so I actually think
I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners who have actually bought some gold since they got into Bitcoin.
Maybe a little. I mean, I like to say it's really good for bribing the border guards, right? I mean,
I think it's just to hedge your bets.
Exactly. I mean, Foss always used to say that gold is a CDS on the failure of Bitcoin, right? I mean, if for some reason the Bitcoin network went down, gold would go straight up. And there's one other piece we haven't really talked about, but it's worth mentioning, is that we're in a monetary crisis. We're in a sovereign debt crisis. We all kind of can see that. And we see that the money is broken. And, guess what? Other people in the world see that too, including, central banks and foreign central banks. And, not everyone's enlightened yet about Bitcoin. And let's just say maybe there's a time where we need a monetary reset. Well, I think those foreign central banks might think, let's go to gold first. They're not ready for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin may not be ready for them. So
we've seen recently the shift. They're buying less and less treasuries and more and more gold.
Exactly. I mean, that's right.
I mean, that seems to be what's driving the gold price. It doesn't seem to be retail buyers.
Correct. In fact, it's very interesting. If you look at the charts of U.S. gold-based ETFs, they are shrinking.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's funny, they're almost shrinking in the same way that the Bitcoin ETFs are growing. And I think a lot of people have, and I think Bitcoin has stolen a good piece of gold's thunder, in that respect. Keep in mind, though, that there's still a lot more to go. I mean, the Bitcoin network is worth what, 1.4 today or 1.3?
Something like that.
Right?
Fraction of gold.
Yeah. Gold's $12 trillion. Now, also keep in mind, excuse me for a second. Also keep in mind that not all of that 12 trillion is really available. That includes every museum in the world, which, we're not going to melt down, famous museum artifacts. That includes all the jewelry that's around women's necks. Now, at a high enough price, a lot of that jewelry will get melted down. That includes all the gold that's held by central banks.
Isn't there a crazy percentage of gold in India?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what the percentage of the...
Yeah, I would guess like 20% or 30% of the world's gold is in India. Yeah, it's crazy because they're so culturally in love with it. And a lot of it's in China, too. And China underreports what they own, but we know they're underreporting. The reason we know that is most of the gold in the world is refined in Switzerland. It's the biggest refinery. And they do report where they send their gold. And they're sending just gobs and gobs of it to China. So if there were a monetary reset and gold were the chosen vehicle, the Indians and Chinese would benefit, disproportionately to the rest of the world, which is why Jason Lowery and his whole thesis, I think, is so important that the U.S. just leapfrog that and, we go on a Bitcoin standard and just skip the gold step.
Yeah.
But, whether or not we'll be smart enough to do that, who knows? I mean, yeah, right. I mean, think of our government.
Nothing points to that.
Yeah, they're not the sharpest tools in the drawer, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm curious as to, you're here in El Salvador.
I love it.
The first country to adopt Bitcoin
There'll be more.
as legal tender, and to put it on their balance sheet.
Yep.
Do you think there are other countries out there right now that are secretly doing this?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. I do, and I don't think, why would they broadcast it?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're trying to do it and do it.
If you're trying to accumulate, you don't want to push the price up.
Exactly. So yes, I do. I strongly do. I was at Satoshi's Roundtable, which is a Bitcoin and crypto event in Dubai, and the entire a big piece of the Dubai, the UAE royal family and their advisors were attending and listening quite carefully. And yes, I think that there are other countries that are accumulating Bitcoin. It wouldn't surprise me if Russia, as an example, were mining and holding Bitcoin. I don't think China is enlightened enough to do it. I could be wrong, but I do think that other countries are going to be doing it. It's it's game theory and it's kind of an arms race. And I will say this, another data point I think is relatively important. It was told us, in a small meetup where we were with him before the government clamped down on him and took away his ability to sell his book. Jason Lowery, the guy who works at the Pentagon, and he said his belief is that, the CIA and the Pentagon get it. I mean, in other words, they read his book. They understand that this is going to be the apex predator of the monetary network, and they get it, and they think we should be buying it. The problem is, the Fed, the Treasury, the Congress, the president, everybody else hates it because it threatens their money game and the way they can print at will and so on and so forth. So you've got kind of competing factions, but not everybody in the U.S. government's stupid.
Well, and I'm sure even within those organizations, there's some people that
even
really get it, and other people
are like,
that,
nah, we don't believe. Right. Yeah.
It was interesting after they adopted Bitcoin as legal tender here that the U.S. embassy here was like freaked out. They were they were completely blindsided. Like they had no.
Well, and what the other thing I thought
was
was interesting is the IMF response to El Salvador. I mean, they did not like that one bit, right?
No, it was amazing, and I think that people say they rushed the things here and that it was messy, and that's all true. But I really think that was by design. That Bukele was smart enough to know that if he gave them time, they would back channel and make they'd
figure out some way to mess him up.
And they would make all these threats that if you do this, we're going to do that. But if he just got the toothpaste out of the tube, it would, even if it made a mess,
it's too late. Yeah, that's interesting. You see that? Yeah, I could see that.
But they sent. It was actually when Peter McCormick was here, the embassy sent like a team of 3 people down. One was their I think their CIA liaison, and he was the most anti. And you could just tell they were just like. Of this group, you could tell one guy of the 3 got it.
Oh, really?
One guy was like, no, this is only money laundering, and the CIA guy, and the other guy was kind of neutral. But they were just like, what? Explain what happened here.
Yeah, what happened?
How did we miss this?
All
the all the spying and everything that they do, they had no idea that it was coming. It's like it was announced in Miami at this conference.
I know. It's like and they weren't paying attention. It was like a wake-up call. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I often think that I mean, there was a time where they probably could have really thrown sand in our face, messed us up, and killed this whole damn thing. Do you know what I mean? If they'd, put restrictions on it or taxed it. I mean, they're all kind. But now, I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube, as you say. I mean, and these 3 judges in Delaware. I mean, these guys are going to go down as heroes. The ones who approved, who saw it the way that in favor of grayscale, because that's what pushed Gensler to do the ETF, and the ETF. It's just an enormously important thing, as Saylor says. He's right. I mean, I totally agree.
So you agree? You're on that side. See, I still have.
I know it's not self-custody, but go ahead. What don't you like about it?
My concern is this is going to be the government's sanctioned way for you to have Bitcoin.
Totally agree. And I talked about that yesterday. Totally agree.
And they're going to push more and more.
Totally.
And they're not going to say it's illegal to self-custody, but they're just going to make it more and more challenging.
Absolutely.
That people just it's not worth it to them.
Absolutely. There's a strong possibility that they looked at it and said, okay, this is going to happen either way. Let's at least have it in our system rather than out of our system, so that if we decide in the future that we want to shut it down, we can make 6 phone calls to Fidelity, BlackRock, and say, give everybody back their cash and send the Bitcoin to us. 6102. I mean it's very possible this way, and also they know they're going to get the tax income on it, right? I mean, one of the things they hate about it now is, you buy it cheap, you sell it, you don't report it. I mean, it's pretty easy to be, to avoid the tax, and so this way they do get the tax. So I hear you on that, and I agree with that, and I think that's a risk down the road. But having said that, I think the counterweight to that, and why I think they're in general net good, is that they just bring more people into the understanding of what it is, and they will push the price up, and the price being higher will pay for the development of Lightning and all the other things that'll help with the adoption that we so badly need. If we intend to make sats legal tender and denominate most things in sats, we got to have a lot more users, and they help, and this helps, right?
No, and that's where we'll see it play out over history. Does that bring people in? My fear is that keeps people from actually spending Bitcoin, using it, having circular economies like we see here.
Yeah, and look, I think the circular economy thing is great. I think spending Bitcoin is great, but I'm with Saylor. This is digital property, and let's win on the digital property argument first. Let's get that one right, and because and stop the monetary debasement and protect people from being stolen from the government every year. If we get that piece right to start with, we can take our time. I mean, I wish we wouldn't. I wish it would go faster to have the payments and the Lightning and all the other stuff around it that you and I both know we need to really make it spendable money and everyday money. But right now it really is a good version of digital gold. Is the best way I see it. I mean, to me, gold is analog sound money and Bitcoin is digital sound money. And so, and let's let it win on that basis. I mean, it'll pass gold here sometime in the next few years, pretty easily in my view. And and the other things, those apps will come, the Fedimints will launch, and we'll have, more and more Lightning transactions. I mean, I was stunned. Here I arrive in El Salvador, I come through customs, I show my passport, I have to pay my entry fee, which is very modest, it's like $12 or something. Mm-hmm. And I asked, what do you take? And Bitcoin, MasterCard, or cash. And I thought, this is great, And so, it's a real advancement.
It's amazing the number of Bitcoiners who I've seen make their first Lightning transaction in El Salvador. I'm like, well, I know there's Lightning, but I've never actually used it. I'm like, right. Oh, come on, you've got to get going. Yeah. Even I think Peter McCormick it was his first time he used Lightning. He was here early. He was one of the first to come, and he bought pupusas with Lightning, and then. Ray Yusuf from Paxful, he now No One's, I think it is, that he was here and he's like, I've never used Lightning before.
So you live in El Zonte. I mean, when you go out to dinner or you go to a store or you do things in El Zonte, what percentage of the time can you use Lightning to transact?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, but part of that's just because I don't go to the
places that don't have it. I get
it.
But there are enough places that have. So you've got a grocery store, you've got a gas station, you've got
the gas station was the hardest one for some reason.
Okay.
And that was partially a problem with Chivo because these people said they took Bitcoin, but it only worked if you had a Chivo wallet. So it's not really Bitcoin. But now there is a gas station on board. But yeah, the main supermarket in the country takes Bitcoin. Their version of Costco, which is PriceSmart, takes Bitcoin.
Nice.
We've bought a couple brand new trucks for the project.
My goodness,
that we paid in Bitcoin.
From an auto dealer?
Yeah.
No, wow.
So, there's tons of people are buying properties in Bitcoin.
You can go out for a restaurant meal, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, if you get outside of El Zonte, then
it falls off quickly.
There's going to be, if you want to only spend Bitcoin, you can definitely outside of El Zonte live on Bitcoin only. But you're going to be, you're going to have
I get it.
But in El Zonte,
So you've got a real circular economy.
Oh yeah.
That's great.
It's still in process. Still a lot of those. A lot of the businesses are like keeping their Bitcoin and have started paying their employees at least a portion in Bitcoin. A lot of them are converting to dollars, but now, that as we get into a bull market, they're like, oh man, I should have and so I think. That's always helpful to get them, to see that over time. And, then they hear from us, hey, dollar's just going to keep going down. And so there's one hotel owner in particular, Palo Verde, which is a beautiful hotel.
That's a nice hotel, right?
Yeah. And he came on early, and it's a family business. He's, I think the son that, but it's, some of his parents' money. And he's like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to go all in Bitcoin, and we're going to keep it. And he said it was very hard during the bear market because everybody's like, hey, dude, you're an idiot. But he's like, no, I look like a genius. And everybody's like, okay, that was obvious decision.
And when you take it to 70, it goes to 15. It's a little hard.
So now you see, but now they was taking it when it was at 15, and now
Right,
it's at
and
70.
now it's at 70, yeah.
So they're sitting very, very good with it. And so it's funny too that it freaks me out sometimes because I'll go to these little stores, and I go to pay, and I see their balance when because it's on their phone, and I'm like,
is it pretty good?
you should not have that on your phone.
That's too much to have.
We need to upgrade you to a hardware wallet.
Yeah, I need to show you what Cold Card is.
But when it was at 15,000, it was a different thing. Now that it's 70,000, because they're just accumulating and spending when they need to. The nice thing too for them is there's a lot of services that they can pay. They don't have bank accounts, but they can pay their electric bill with Bitcoin. They can pay, yeah.
Wow.
So some of them through third-party services, the electric bill is something you do through Bitrefill. But
I see. The company helps you do it.
It's a direct. I mean, it's very simple, and it saves.
Bitrefill, they take a small slice of that.
Yeah, so. I think they get a slice from the the electric company because it saves them. Right. Otherwise, they have to take all these payments in person. So they have a cost of doing that, and so. But it just makes it so much easier because you used to have to go down in person and wait in line.
Well, that's another question I was going to ask. I mean, what percentage of the people are banked in El Zonte? I mean, was it a high percentage, low percentage?
It's probably about 30% in El Zonte. I think nationwide it's about 40%, but that would obviously the people living in the capital city would have a higher propensity. Yeah. Part of it is the banks are horrible in El Salvador. I mean, it absolutely.
They rip you off at every time.
Well, and they just make it so painful to do anything. You wait in line for an hour, then I finally got a bank account here, and we signed. I mean, the stack of paper like this. They wanted my tax returns from the U.S. It was, and then they come back out and they're like, "Your signature's wrong. You need to redo it." I'm like, "What do you mean my signature's wrong?" They're like, "Well, it doesn't match your
other signature,
your Salvadoran ID card, which is one of those electronic things that don't work half the time."
Right. Of course it doesn't.
So they made me sit. I mean, I kid you not, a stack of papers like this.
You had to trace it?
They had me trace it on the 20 places I was supposed to sign. So they're just so bad, and they're so afraid of the U.S. They're so afraid of getting kicked off the SWIFT system.
Interesting.
Even one of the banks that's a national bank has been kicked off the SWIFT system. So there's this threat overhang from the U.S. government. So they don't want. There's no banks in El Salvador that will let you send a direct transaction from any Bitcoin exchange. Huh. So they're just so fearful.
How do you? What's the principle? You're in El Zonte and you're working, and I assume you're probably. I mean, the currency used here is the dollar, right? Yeah. You're getting paid in dollars, but not sats because your employer's not enlightened. You then want to convert those dollars into sats. Can you go to a store and do that? Are there ATMs where you can do that? Is there a broker here that'll help you do that? I mean, how do you do that? Yeah, there's kind of
all the above. That has been one of the good things about Chivo. They have the Chivo ATMs, and there's really no commission or fees, or it's very slight.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So there's a way. So there's an on-ramp, is what you're saying. Yeah. That's great.
And then there's also a local ATM company that's developed these cool Lightning ATMs that you can buy a nickel worth of Bitcoin.
Oh my goodness!
It's a coin operated.
Is there one Lightning wallet that kind of works best in El Zonte? Because one of the things I've seen with Lightning is some wallets work some places, some don't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Is there one down there that everybody uses? Or?
So the main one that people use is Blink, which was the Bitcoin Beach wallet originally. We separated the names just because one's a grassroots. And the others is a for-profit, and we don't really have anything to officially do with it, even though they're great. Gallo is a great company, and they have a great product, and so theirs works. The biggest problem is some Lightning wallets will work with the QR codes where it has a zero, you put in the amount. There's other wallets that only will work if you actually create a QR code and put the amount in, and so. But it seems to be getting better and better. Initially, that was a huge problem,
right?
But it seems to be now.
That's
most
my
of the
experience
wallets
in the States too. I mean, most of my Lightning transactions are at Bitcoin things, right? Because that's where obviously people are prepared to take sats.
Are you leaving directly from here? Or are you going to make? Okay, so you're not going to go to El Zonte at all?
I'd love to, but I got to. Sadly, my wife needs to be back in the States tomorrow, and so I got to get out of here tomorrow morning. Yeah. So I can't. I don't have time. But I'd love.
Well, you'll have to come back and spend some time in El Zonte and just see how
I want to do it
seamlessly. It's
I mean, this is kind of my introduction, but I will be back because I'm very impressed by it. It's a great country.
It's funny because once you get used to it, it's actually way easier. You don't never have to bring any cash with you.
No credit cards, no nothing. Yeah,
my kids will be like, they'll text me like, "Dad, I need Bitcoin for the pizza," and it's like, and there's no Venmo or anything like that works here. So if that didn't exist, you'd sometimes get in a situation where you couldn't get them funds. And it's funny just how easy it works, and that's what I think draws a lot of people in. And I think El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin has actually supercharged the development of Lightning applications, and it's shown like, hey, there's a real need for these to be user friendly. So so I'm curious as to what your theory is to like why there's people like in the gold space that get Bitcoin, and then there's people like Peter Schiff that like are gonna go to their grave.
They're going down with the ship. I don't know on that one. But as a general rule, I would divide it into a couple of buckets. I think the biggest thing that a lot of gold people have trouble getting comfortable with Bitcoin on is they're bounded in a history of gold or of money having to have a physical property and being a commodity of some sort. You can touch it and feel it. And there were commodity cycles, and there've been a lot of forms of commodity money. Of course, gold emerged as the superior one, and they can't they have a hard time getting away from the fact that you can't touch it and see it and feel it, and so they can't make the jump from a physical ledger, a physical piece of a ledger to a paper ledger, but yet, what's so funny to them when I push them on this is they've done it in every other part of their life. I mean, if you look at their bank balance, it's not like the bank has the money sitting in the vault. It's just a bunch of zeros and ones on a screen.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And I also try and use the analogy where I say, look, before mankind even found gold and mined gold and determined that gold was the best form of money, we have historical records of people sitting in caves and putting markings on the wall, tally sticks, and keeping track of shit. And so money is a social obligation. If I have money, I can pay you to give me food or gasoline or whatever I want. And in turn, if I do labor for you, you pay me money for doing the labor. And so it's just an obligation between people. And it's really, money at its base is really just a ledger. It's just keeping score of who owes who what. So why does a ledger need to have a physical property? And so I kind of...
And you think gold people would get that?
You do. And also gold people are generally Austrian economists. And Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian school, said money is just the most liquid good by definition. And so, it's what has the superior properties that lead it to be a liquid good. And, Bitcoin has superior properties and we're all adopting it. Now, if we weren't all adopting Bitcoin, I mean, money is a shared illusion.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone agrees that a dollar is money because everyone knows you can go into a store and pay for shit with it. And the government prints it fine. Everyone agrees that gold is money. It's been around 5,000 years. It's hard to get it out of the ground. They know what it is. It's shiny. You can see it, et cetera. And what's happening is everybody's going to one day agree that Bitcoin is money. A lot of us already know that, but some people don't. Some people don't believe that it's money, but the number of those people are shrinking and the number of people who believe are growing. As long as that trend continues, Bitcoin's going to be money. I mean, it already is, but it's going to be, and if you look at its properties, if you look at its characteristics, I mean, that's what led Saylor to go, this is a better weapon. I mean, it's or safe to say, we just invented gunpowder, and gold guys have got spears and axes. Fucking gunpowder's going to win.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so I think, but a lot of people are hung up in the physicality. Then I think the other thing to defend my gold friends a little bit, as you watch the whole crypto thing unfold from back to present, there was a lot of fucking bullshit and fraud. I mean, a lot, right? I mean, you had Novogratz, there were a ton of grifters, there were a ton of
there still is in the crypto space.
There still are, right. But my point is, at least, the biggest one is now headed to jail. But I mean, there was so much criminality around all these tokens and, pre-mining and, even Ethereum, which, monetary policy's changed 6 times. I mean, there's so much criminality around all these that, and people, we all live and operate with mental heuristics, right? You just kind of, we don't have time to figure out everything to the nth degree. You just kind of, you look at it, you see a pattern, you go, okay, I know what that means. I'm not, based on that pattern, this is how I'm going to behave, right? I'm not going to go dig deep and figure out that Bitcoin's a totally different animal and it's not crypto. They don't have time for that. They just look at it and go, hey, they're a bunch of fucking grifters, pounding the table here. I know those are bad people. It can't be anything good in that space. And I get that. I mean, I understand that. And so
Well, especially when the media lumps Bitcoin and everything.
That's right.
Like you have Ben McKenzie, the guy from the OC that's written the book recently. He showed up here in El Salvador for the conference. He wanted to do some type of hit thing, I'm sure. And we're like, hey, we agree with 90% of what you're saying. You just are confused. You think Bitcoin and crypto are the same thing.
That's exactly right.
They're like really on opposite ends of the spectrum.
That's exactly right. And so, and those people have done us a lot of harm.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, they've really slowed down. They threw sand in the eyes of a lot of people who, might have understood this more easily and better if there hadn't been all that fraud going on.
Well, that's why I'm so thankful to Max and Stacy, because they have come down and just brought the hammer down.
There are a ton of people.
Every
Max
scammer.
And Stacy, Corey Klipstein. There are a lot of people who've been out there just pounding the table and calling out these frauds. Hell, there were a lot of us. I recall being with a bunch of Bitcoiners in Madeira, the first Madeira conference a bunch of years ago, and we were talking about how we knew Sam Bankman-Fried was a fraud.
Yeah.
Caitlin knew Sam Bankman-Fried was a fraud. She was telling the SEC. This was not hard to figure out. Go look at his box video where he talks about creating money in a box. It's very obvious he was a scamster, and yet people didn't see it for a while, and it took time to unfold. But I understand. When I talk to friends who are normies who have zero knowledge of the space, they immediately say, "Oh, really? That's that thing that Bankman-Fried went to. Is going. They jump to that, right?" And I say, "You're right. That was really, really, really bad. And there's a lot of that out there. But what you're missing is the signal of this digital innovation, this unique digital innovation, and it's so important technologically what they figured out, the Satoshis, figured out. It really is important.
So do you think that story will just become clearer over time?
Yeah, I do. And I think, I've seen in my gold friend, cohort, I've seen more and more of them slowly but surely coming over. Maybe you're right. I've seen my investors say, maybe you're right. I've seen how do I buy this thing again? What's this cold storage thing? It's, as recently as a couple of years ago, I gave a speech at a gold conference. It's funny, I'm not getting invited to gold conferences to give speeches as much anymore because, they kind of think I've joined the enemy camp, I guess. By the way, I don't see them as two enemy camps.
No,
I see them
synergistically.
And we'll get into that in a minute. But I asked the question at this conference: I said, how many of you guys? And this is old. Generally speaking, gold conferences are older people. You don't find 25-year-olds at old conferences. 30-year-olds, 50, 60, 70-year-old people. And I said, how many own Bitcoin? Half the hands went up. So they're getting there. They're definitely getting there. That's why. The other thing I would say to Bitcoiners too, and I say to gold guys, one, don't attack Bitcoiners. They're on the same team as you. But I also say to Bitcoiners, and when Saylor originally came out and was kind of like gold's the enemy, we got to crush gold. I didn't find that constructive. And the reason I didn't was your gold guy is actually one of your easiest converts.
100%.
Because they totally understand the problem. They get it. They believe in monetary debasement. They know the government's a mess. They know what's coming. What they don't understand is that there's an alternative solution that's superior. And so, with kindness, we need to educate them as to why, okay, I'm not saying sell all your ounces. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that having zero Bitcoin, in 10, 15 years, I bet you're going to regret that. So you should definitely start to put your toe in the water and get some Bitcoin. And of course, once you, as we all know, once you put your toe in the water, it's a slippery slope. And pretty soon you become a complete raving orange-pilled nut, like you or me. Right?
Yeah, you rarely see somebody start with a 2% allocation and then decide they want to drop to a 1% allocation.
It's just not the way it goes.
It's always the other
It's just
direction.
not the way it goes. Yeah, so what they say, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. And so my view is, buy now, avoid the rush, because it's gonna cost more. And I think it's hard for people to understand this, but everybody thinks they paid too much for their Bitcoin, But when it's $1 million a coin, and being a whole coiner is a big deal, you won't regret that you paid 70 versus 68 or 75 versus whatever. Obviously, the buy of the century, really. And I was buying, but not, I was pretty fully allocated, so I really didn't have any money to buy. But I know some guys who kind of got it late. And then after the FTX, they bought in heavy at 15.
That was the risk reward adjusted.
What a fucking trade. I was paying 17 in 2017.
Yeah.
Okay. So here you are.
When there was still a lot more risk.
Enormously more risk, right? Here you are 7 years later, and it was probably 6 years later, because 15 was a year ago now, I think at least. But and you got an opportunity to buy it for 15. What?
No, I'm like you. I bought a little
gift.
at that time, but I was already all in.
I was already all
so,
in. I was selling what I could of other stuff, but I was already all in.
But I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like,
it was really quite a bargain, right?
Yeah. That I remember talking to my wife because she gets a little nervous. She's
they all do.
We're all in Bitcoin, and she's like, I'm like, we need to buy more. She's like, but it's going down. I'm like, no, trust me. This is the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's. Yeah, when it went to 15, I recall my wife thinking, are you sure about this shit? And I was like, yep, I am. Just relax. We'll be fine.
The worst for me is because the first entry point early on, it was hard to buy it in your IRA unless you did the whole self-directed thing, which was a pain in the butt, really.
It really is, yeah.
And so my wife was in, hers was all allocated to GBTC. So not only was it going down with Bitcoin, but then it was trading at like 50% the value. And she's like,
what the hell? It's not even equal to the low Bitcoin price. Yeah, I know.
And then at that time, you're like, well, does somebody know something I don't know? And this Bitcoin doesn't really exist. And then I'm trying to like tell her, no, it's going to be okay. But in my mind, I'm going, I hope this isn't some giant rug pull.
Right. No, I agree with you. There was a time when that discount was pretty large, and
it got up to like 50%.
I know it did,
and it was
I know it did, and it was. And you're thinking, boy, they better have those fucking coins.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No. So I was relieved when that whole thing played out, and it was a lesson learned to not do not do what's easy. You gotta control access.
Having the keys to your coins is critical. It's absolutely critical, and that's by the way, as we talk people into buying the ETF to get them started, the next talk is the self-custody talk.
Yeah,
because the ETF doesn't solve that.
No, it doesn't. But like you said, it can pique people's interest and get them. Start going down the
rabbit hole. And there are certain pools of capital, as you say. Starting a self-directed IRA is hard.
Yeah.
There's certain, I even have some legacy IRA 401k stuff, and hey, okay, fine. It would be hard for me to get that to where I want it to be to buy the. I've got a lot of coins I have the keys to, so I just said, fine, I'm going to buy the ETF. It's like I got exposure to the price there. It's a small percentage of my holdings, but it's it's there.
Yeah. No. Sometimes you got to do what makes sense.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's you only have so much time in the day.
So, well, I'd like to get a prediction from you. Will we see a country go back on the gold standard or on the Bitcoin standard first?
Ooh, that's a really tough call. I don't know the answer to that. That's a really tough call. I probably think the Bitcoin standard first. I think that we're talking about two different sets of countries, right? The bigger, more powerful countries aren't ready and aren't going to go to the Bitcoin standard. If they try to reset, if China or something tried to reset, Russia, maybe they would be more inclined to go to gold because they hold a lot of it, et cetera, et cetera. But the way the game theory is set up, I mean, the smaller countries have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Yeah. I mean, it's not a surprise that a very small third world country was the first adopter. There was nothing but upside here.
Well, especially because they had already given up their own currency. They had the dollar, so it wasn't even competing with their own currency.
Exactly. And so I think we will see some more small countries make this flip. I mean, I was disappointed recently to see Malaya in Argentina doesn't fully understand the difference between crypto and Bitcoin. I mean, but I mean, there's a candidate for maybe eventually flipping in our favor, or in Ecuador or Colombia, or I mean, I think we will see other countries adopting it. Perhaps some of the countries over in Eastern Europe. I think a couple of those kind of get it. We'll have to see. But even if no other country adopts it, I think the more important thing just is as number go up and as it becomes more and more of a stable reserve asset, and as volatility goes down, and the volatility is going down. It's just, it's going to be just more and more common to own this stuff. And the other thing that I would point out that I just think is really important for everybody to focus on is just the macro picture of how early we are and how big this could be and where it could go and why.
Well, it's crazy how it lines up too with the decisions the U.S. government's making and how they are just. It seemed like before they could maybe always pull back. Now it's like I don't see any path back.
We have totally crossed the event horizon of sound money. I mean, the only chance they would ever have of getting us back on the right path would be to try and do what Paul Volcker did, which is really increase interest rates, really cut spending, balance the budget.
But even with the government debt level that
Well, that's my point. That's my
it's
point.
impossible.
If they do that, then the interest costs balloon, and then we have an enormous recession. And I think you're right. I mean, I think we have crossed the Rubicon where there is no going back. And so now the only thing that's uncertain to all of us is, at what rate and in what bumpy fashion do we go forward with more monetary debasement? I mean, I love looking at the Fed balance sheet. It was $800 billion, before 2008, and it bumped up on that to, 3.7 at the high, came back in a bit, and then it bumped up to 9. It's coming back in again. I mean, I think the next bump takes us to 20, right? I mean, it's kind of logical. I mean, Lynn Alden has a great chart in her book that shows that how the base money supply has to be available to support the debt. Without growing the money supply, the debt starts to default, which, you could have that. That's the 1930s.
Yeah.
That's a deflation. That's a depression. And that's always a possible outcome. I mean,
But I just don't think they have the stomach for that.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's always a possible outcome, except that consider we're dealing with politicians whose job is to keep kicking the can, if they can. And
they think they were successful in COVID. I think
absolutely.
They took the exact opposite lesson from it.
Absolutely.
They're
worked.
thinking MMT works.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. But remember, they do react to the body politic and what the body politic is saying. And the body politic is pretty friggin' pissed off about inflation.
Yeah.
Pretty friggin' pissed off. I mean, there isn't a person in this country. I mean, pre this whole event, if you said inflation, everyone was like, whatever.
Yeah.
It was a little bit. I mean, it was no big. I mean, I think you look around, tables of families throughout this country. I can't imagine there's a family that's not talking about inflation and what a problem it is. You know what I mean? And so that's a big deal. I mean, the politicians are going to have to deal with that. I mean, they're going to, and they're trying to deal with it. They're trying to pretend like they're dealing with it, but
I think before they were impacted by it, and they knew they were because of the housing market and everything, that they felt like, I'm falling behind where my parents were at this time.
Right.
But they didn't see it at the grocery store.
Right.
Now they've got both at the same time. They still can't afford to buy a house or live in anything decent. And now they can't afford groceries.
I've got 3 kids in their 20s, and I mean, they're just looking at me like, Dad, we're screwed. I mean, they're all doing fine.
Yeah,
they're all finely paid, not excessively, but they're fine. But the notion
like
of
in the previous generation, they would have been definitely go buy a
house,
middle class house,
buy a car. I mean, it's like it's like no. I mean, they're pinched. They're really, really pinched, and that's playing itself out all throughout the country. I mean, everybody's feeling the same level of pain, and
unless you're on a Bitcoin standard.
Well, that's right. Unless you're on a Bitcoin standard, in which case everything's getting cheaper. I love that meme that somebody put up on the web or on Twitter where it showed the cost of a house in Bitcoin, right? And
Preston and I were talking about that yesterday.
It's like.
Housing prices are crashing.
Housing. The fiat price of the houses have gone up, but the Bitcoin price of the houses have gone down substantially. I mean, it was like 30 Bitcoin to 15 Bitcoin to like 4 Bitcoin to buy the average house or whatever. I mean, it's really quite amazing. So it's definitely a better savings technology.
And I love that meme too, because I think that's something that people that. They don't care about finances. They don't care, talking about Bitcoin. They're like, but you show them that, they're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is why I can't afford a house, but these people can. Like, it's a big difference. And as I say, more and more people are going to wake up to it, and they are waking up to it. I mean, we see that every day. So, to me, it's an exciting time because I think we're kind of, Preston and I were speaking about this on yesterday, I think we're kind of at the elbow of that curve where this is really about to go bigger mainstream. We were pretty fringe, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a few years ago. But now, this is, the ETF, that terrible channel CNBC, but, they're talking about Bitcoin every day. They're putting the price up there. I mean, it's going bigger stream, and so, if you look at, the adoption of cell phones or the adoption of any new technology, any new innovation, you reach a point in the S curve where the adoption really starts to grow rapidly. I feel like we're at that point. I'm waiting for somebody to come out with the inverse Kramer Bitcoin prediction fund. I know there was an inverse Kramer fund, but his Bitcoin calls are always. Anytime he says, "Okay, Bitcoin's a buy," I'm like, "Oh, we're in for it."
Yeah, Peter Zehan. They're all these terrible people who are just, I'm like, fine, short it, please short it.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Just getting destroyed.
Yeah.
Well, any other observations you have for
El
Salvador?
I really appreciate being on your show. I love El Salvador. I met nothing but nice people here, and
well, you gotta come back with your wife.
Yeah, I'll bring my wife back.
Beautiful hotels in El Zonte.
I know that. Yeah,
and
I think we're coming back and going to El Zonte. I think that's the plan to get to know it better, and it's a very nice place, and
short flight from Florida.
Yeah, it really is. It's
under 3 hours.
Yeah, it's 2.5 hours less. Yeah, from Miami. So it was quite easy to get here. No problem there. So, I commend Max and Stacy. I commend you. I commend the people up in Berlin. Obviously, it's making a difference, right? And I think that. Historically in the United States, a lot of people who are looking to come down to, kind of Latin America to retire, that Costa Rica was kind of the go-to place, right? I have a lot of friends who've taken, and, I haven't been to Costa Rica, but, because this is Bitcoin and that's not, and they're similar, I think I'd come here first, for
Well,
sure.
and the difference we're seeing here, too, is people are coming to build here. I think they come there because, it's cheaper and it's paradise, but people see opportunity here, and so that's the difference we're seeing.
There's a circular economy. There's businesses. There's stuff happening.
They're like, this is the new frontier.
Yeah.
So that's what's fun, to be around those type of people.
Because they're positive. And that is the great thing about Bitcoiners. We have hope. We know that this is going to make the world a better place, and there is upside in being in this group. It's not just about number go up. It's about, society get better.
Yeah.
And that's
wanting the financial system to be fair and equitable.
Yeah, exactly. If the finance system is fair, by definition, society will get better.
Yeah.
No, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I've enjoyed being on the show. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well,
thank you very much.
We'll get you back down here soon.
Yeah, I'll come visit El Zonte sometime.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.